Hello everyone, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I have my March wrap-up. So in the month of March, we're going to be jumping right into all of the stats. I read 11 books. I did still have one DNF. I've had one DNF every single month this year, but it is slightly lower than January or February. I'm actually still very happy that I got 11 because January and February were only 13 each, because I went on vacation and then the entire family got sick and I threw out my TBR. It ended up being just like a more calm reading month in the middle of the month, especially because of that stuff happening. So getting through 11 books when the other 2 months were only 13, like I feel like I caught up pretty well. Like I'm happy about that. Let's move into pages read. Now this one definitely took a little bit of a nosedive, but I think it's just because I was reading some shorter things, which was just easier for me to keep attention on, especially after being sick. So in the month of March, I read 2,634 pages. I read over 4,000 in January, over 3,000 in February, but in general, my main goal every single month is to get around 2,000 pages read at least. So I'm still over the 2,000 mark. I'm actually very happy about that. And then if we actually go down to audiobooks, I did keep up pretty well with my audiobook listening. I read 14 hours worth of audiobooks. February is the highest so far, which is a little surprising to me, at 15.2, and then January was quite low. So I did obviously read some books in audio and quite a big chunk of them. We're gonna go into those reading methods actually right there. So in the month of March, I read 2 physical books, 3 audiobooks, and 6 ebooks. So yeah, pretty much taking the easy road for me personally was ebooks and audiobooks in the month of March. I didn't read very many physical things because it was just not really the way I was wanting to read, especially after going on vacation, being sick. I mean, we listened to an audiobook on the drive for vacation, so I mean, like, hey. Moving into the genre of books that I read, we're quite all over the place. I had 3 fantasies, 3 sci-fis, 2 contemporaries, 1 horror, 1 retelling, like it was basically purely a retelling, and 1 non-fiction. For the book format, I did have 2 graphic novels as well as 9 novels. My indie versus traditionally published, I had 4 indie books and 7 traditional published books. I do want to mention here that I do count indie not just self-published, because there are indie presses that are much lower, like as long as they're not part of like the big 4, one of their imprints, that kind of thing. And so I think definitely a couple of the comics that I read as well, that I count as graphic novels on the stats, I do think they were from indie presses, so those are counted here. As for how I got it, 4 of them were from my owned TBR, 4 of them I borrowed from the library, 2 of them were ARCs, advanced reader copies that I needed to read, and 1 of them was gifted to me. For the age category, I did read 7 adult titles, 3 young adult titles, and 1 middle grade. I want to say that it's pretty average for what I'm reading nowadays. Definitely more adult, but still trying to get some young adult and middle grade in there. And then let's move on to the star ratings. So I had a pretty good month, even though like the actual feeling of wanting to read wasn't always there. I had 1 DNF, like we mentioned, 1 3-star, 1 3.5 star, 4 4 stars, and 4 5-star reads. So my average for the month is 3.95. That's pretty good. I want to say that's higher than my average for the entire year. Yeah, my average for the entire year right now is about 3.75, so we're like 0.2 higher just from March, which is amazing. So yeah, that's all of the stats. Let's now move into the books that I read this month. We are going to start with the DNF and then go all the way to my favorite book. So the DNF was an ARC that I had, and I was very, very upset about it. I have been trying to be better about actually writing physical reviews, writing reviews that you can read on Goodreads and things like that, Storygraph as well, I'm on both. And so some people have already like seen how I felt about it, and we've talked about it a little bit, but like this is something that I was highly anticipating, and it is Those Beyond the Wall by Micaiah Johnson. This is the sequel to The Space Between Worlds, which was my favorite book the year that book came out. I don't remember if it was 2020, it might have been 2020. My favorite book. I own 2 copies. A normal copy, that's the US edition, and an Illumicrate edition. Like, I have both. I loved that one. And my biggest thing I think with this, the reason that I DNF'd it, is it feels like a completely different thing. Part of it is the writing style for me. The main character that we're following has a very sort of rambling stream of consciousness type of writing, like the way that the narration is, and I did not really like that. I got over 100 pages into this one. Yeah, I got over 100 pages into this one, and I still did not understand a single thing that was happening, because we're basically following a character that was not in The Space Between Worlds. But not only that, they basically took this novel and at one of the points bring a character back from The Space Between Worlds, which is not necessarily a bad thing, especially if it's going to be a sequel in a series, that kind of thing, but it sort of took the ending of The Space Between Worlds and like retroactively said, nah, we didn't actually do that. Like it retconned it, and I did not enjoy that. I also was just like not too sure what was going on. I know the author had an author's note at the beginning of this one because I did read it as an ARC. And I don't know if the note is in the physical copy or anything like that, but she mentioned that she was writing this from a place of anger because of stuff that was happening in the world. And I feel like writing a book from a place of anger is completely legitimate, but I think putting it in the sci-fi setting that we had from The Space Between Worlds that I personally loved so much, and there was not really a place of anger specifically in it, the way it came out was like completely different. Like, it just doesn't feel like the same series, doesn't even feel like companion novels. Like, I think the characters that she had didn't match the characters that we knew, the ones that were supposed to match, the ones that are supposed to be the same, and so it really just took me out of it completely, and I found myself not wanting to pick up the book. This happens with me when I want to DNF sometimes. Sometimes it's about me not wanting to pick up the book more than like I absolutely hate it, and when that happens, it puts me in a reading slump because I don't want to pick up anything because I feel like I have to read something that I really don't. And so it was just a whole bunch of like little things put together, the type of narration, the type of prose, the characters that were supposed to be from book 1 coming into book 2, just like everything didn't quite match up, and I almost wonder if this would have been better as a completely separate book, like not in the same world. So yeah, this was a very highly anticipated read for me, and it did not work. Moving on to my 3-star, this is going to be Beauty's Beast by S.T. Lin. This I mentioned and talked about in my trans rights readathon vlog. I will leave it linked down below because there's actually like 6 books I think we're going to talk about today out of the 11 that I read for that vlog. And one thing I did want to mention is that I recently found out, and this was after I had already edited that vlog video, that S.T. Lin, I knew it was a pen name. It's a pen name for Tammy Valurda, but a lot of people talk about these books as being like a black author. They're not a black author. They're not. They are non-binary, and so it does still fit for the trans rights readathon, but the books that are specifically written under S.T. Lin are all black main characters and talking about a trans black experience sort of thing. So just keep that in mind if this is something you want to read. But also, I gave it 3 stars. Let's just talk about that too. This is the 3rd and I think final book right now in this series of fairy tale retellings with black trans feminine main characters, and this one just didn't quite work for me because it was trying to tie in too closely to the Disney Beauty and the Beast instead of being more original with the retelling. It's also only like 100 pages, and so I feel like if this would have been something that could have been expanded upon and been a little bit more original, I might have liked it more. So it was just sort of like for me, like I'm sort of indifferent to it, if that makes sense. Moving on to my 3.5, I have Life, the Universe, and Everything by Douglas Adams. This is the third book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. I am doing this as a read-along, and so every single month we're reading a new book in the series, and we read the third one for March, obviously. I gave it a 3.5. This is the middle book for me, ratings-wise. Like, I liked Hitchhikers more than this one, but I liked Restaurant at the End of the Universe less than this one. I think part of it is it does have a little bit more of a plot line going through this one specific book. None of these necessarily fit together with a whole plot yet, as far as I can see. Some of the characters that we've known from book 1 and book 2 didn't have as much part to play in this one. Like Arthur Dent, who is our main character, seems to be the main character in book 3, like the one that matters the most. It's still very a little bit nonsensical and time travel, sci-fi-y. One interesting fact is this book, book 3, Life, the Universe, and Everything, does talk about a planet named Cricket, and that's sort of like that plot line that goes through it. Apparently, it was supposed to be a Doctor Who episode way back when, and when they decided not to use it, Douglas Adams took it and made it book 3, which I do think is interesting. So yeah, 3.5. I'm really hoping that book 4 and 5 do something a little bit better for me, maybe bring everything together in a way, because I'm just missing that from this series. Like, it's feeling like individual things that didn't necessarily need to fit together, and I'm hoping somehow it does. Okay, moving into my 4 stars, this is where we're gonna talk about a few things now. So my lowest 4-star is Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar. Again, I talked about this in the Trans Rights Readathon vlog. For me personally, I 100% appreciate the representation in here and the different talk about identities and questioning and all this kind of stuff. My reason for not giving it a higher rating, because I know a lot of people love this, is it's very high school. We have a little bit of like trying to get revenge on people, because there is a sort of outing in this book related to Felix, even though his school and his friends and everybody there does know he's trans, but this is like somebody went in to his personal information and like pulled up his dead name and old pictures and things, and like obviously horrible. But the way some of these characters went about it, I was just like, I don't know, I don't think revenge was the best thing, and then that storyline drops off, and it is, like I said, very high school, in the fact that like we're at a high school, we're dealing with high school classes and things like that, and that's something that I've realized recently is not my thing anymore. Like, I don't mind young adult and teenagers with like fantasy or sci-fi with a lot of things, but like when we're actually in a high school setting dealing with trying to figure out colleges and applications and prom and things, like they didn't have prom in this one, but you know what I mean, actual high school things, I'm not into it as much. I will also say this book did have a lot of underage drinking with alcohol. Just keep that in mind. Like, it was quite excessive in my opinion when they're 17, living in the United States, and we did have a lot of Harry Potter references. So I did like this. By the end of it, it was just, there were some things that were really bugging me and taking me out of the story as we went as well. Then we have Zachary, Ying, and the Dragon Emperor by Zhao. This was a book that was suggested for my 12 Books, 12 Friends. So thank you so much to Athena's Biblioteca on Instagram. I did give this a 4 stars. It was something that when it first started, I was thinking it could potentially live up to the Iron Widow hype for me, because that was like my favorite book of the year that came out. But there were certain things that got to me a little bit, and I think it was mostly the fact that this is a middle grade story. I really appreciated the actual like characters being middle grade age. Our main character of Zachary, Ying, does seem to be gay, or questioning at least his feelings for some boys throughout this process. I really liked just like the small inclusion of that in there as well. I liked the Yu-Gi-Oh aspect of this, because it's basically a virtual reality game similar in some facts to Yu-Gi-Oh with Chinese history. My biggest thing with this, to not give it a 5 stars though, is this book felt like it took forever, because it's basically a really heavy crash course into tons of Chinese history. Like, every so often I would be like, hey honey, this character was mentioned, or this name was mentioned, and he would be able to tell me stuff, but like it was like stuff that he's like, this is very specific for certain things. Like, it was a lot of Chinese history, and because of that, the book felt very long, because we would go and like start to do an action scene, that kind of thing, and then we would end up having to get like multiple paragraphs of Chinese history to explain how a certain weapon or enemy worked, and it was a lot. Also, just so people know, it does get political quite often in this book, specifically about the Chinese government, which again, I feel like is not necessarily a bad thing. We know this author is very vocal about speaking against the Chinese government, like specifically mainland China, but for how often it was pulled up in this middle grade book, it felt a little excessive. Like, if you're a child in America and like, yeah, I can agree, like saying certain things about like oppression and things is good, but they were definitely hitting us over the head with how bad certain things of the Chinese government is, and I personally would not have cared at all about that at the age that this book is marketed to. Like, it just felt excessive. Like, I really like the concept. I probably do want to continue because I think this is supposed to be a series. I think it ended where there was like a little bit open-ended at the end, like they're not fully finished, but it was too much of the history to get into the action. My next 4 stars is Osgood as She Gets by Cooper S. Beckett. So this was another arc that I was given by the author. It came out at the very, very end of February going into March, and so it was like my very first read of the month. This is an indie series. It's actually the 3rd book in a series, but I was told by the author you do not necessarily have to read the first 2 books to get into this one, and it is definitely more like dark paranormal horror sort of stuff, and I really enjoyed this one. I will say I think there were some aspects that I probably would have gotten more if I would have read book 1 or book 2, but I did not hold it against this 3rd book. I've actually already purchased book 1 on ebook because there was a sale around the time this book went live, and I definitely want to check it out. Our main character here is named Osgood. She is queer, she is messy, she's an alcoholic. She also, I think, has pain relievers because she has like a chronic illness and that kind of stuff. Like, I really loved the idea of these characters, and I liked the whole sort of like paranormal element that was here. It's a 4-star mainly because I am demisexual, which is part of the asexual spectrum. I think I've mentioned this many times on my channel, and I don't think I fully realized exactly how much some allosexual people think about sex. It was mentioned so many times in this book. Osgood was always, it felt like, thinking about her next hookup, or like, even if it was about like, oh, I used to have romantic feelings for this person, it was very much about having sex with them previously or again, or there was a lot. And so that was something that definitely just felt too much to me personally. I will also say there are a ton of triggers for this book. The author does have a very nice trigger warning, content warning, author's note at the beginning of the book, which I really appreciated. There are some illustrations in this book. I think there was like 5 or 6 that I counted, and one of them is about a sexual assault. And so 1, it is very sexually graphic, but also 2, it's a very uncomfortable situation. So just keep that in mind as well. But like I said, I already purchased book 1 of this series. I want to go back and read book 1 and book 2 because I do really like the more like horror paranormal aspect, and I like the fact that our character is sort of that messy queer character. Like, I really did like that aspect. And then my last 4-star I also talked about in my Trans Rights Readathon vlog. It's Fina by Nino Cipri. This was a novella, and the reason it's a 4-star is I wanted more from it. So don't get me wrong, I really liked this one, but I feel like it could have been expanded more and really given us more because it ends a little bit open-ended. But basically we're following 2 characters who work at this like IKEA-like store, and they're ex-partners. So they basically just broke up a couple days ago. They're having to work together, and they find out that there's like these portals to multiverses in their IKEA-like store, and an older woman has gone missing, and so they're tasked with going to go find her, and it gets really weird. I really liked the multiverse portal aspect. Like, it was very, very intriguing, but again, it was just so short for what it was, and it had that open-ended ending that I just really needed more from it. Okay, now we're gonna move into my 5-star reads. The first one I have here is The Outside, Trans and Non-Binary Comics. This has 29 different artists that have comics in here, and it looks like it has 3 different compilers. It says The Cow, David Daneman, and Min Christensen are the compilers here. This is a non-fiction anthology comic collection about these people being trans and non-binary, and I gave it 5 stars because I absolutely love this format of non-fiction. Last month I read Sensory, which was a similar format, a comic anthology non-fiction about being autistic, like creators' own lives, and this is the same thing, a comics anthology about these own creators' lives, about being trans and non-binary. And again, they're very sort of short, simple ways to get an actual, like, real personal experience. I thought a lot of them were very emotional. Like, it hit me in a good way. Like, I just really like this format of them. Again, I did read this for the Trans Rights Readathon, so yeah. Then I read Cheer Up, Love, and Pompoms. This is by Crystal Fraser, and this is a graphic novel about a girl who is trans in high school and ends up being the captain of the cheer team, and we basically follow her as well as her friend Annie, who is like a really, really smart girl in school but doesn't really have enough extracurriculars to like really get into college, so decides to join the cheerleading team. Again, I read it for the Trans Rights Readathon, but I really loved this one. The emotions of it really got me. Like, I just thought it was so well done. The art style was gorgeous, but yeah, it does have some transphobia stuff in here because of the fact that this girl is supposed to be like the first trans person to ever come out at her school, but she is in the cheerleading team, ends up being the captain, and it's about their friendship and their relationship and like that sort of aspect. Like, I know it's set in high school, I will say that, I know that, but I loved this one. The next 5-star I have here is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. This is from another vlog, not the Trans Rights Readathon vlog. This is from me starting a new series called Plot Twist, where we have cards that are scratch-offs. They give us like a quick little, not even a summary of the book, a reason why the book was included in this pack of cards, whether it's part of a series, what kind of like tone it's gonna set. Here we go, the book feel, because I saved the card. This right here. So like the book feel for this was cozy fantasy. It did say it was published in 2022, and the reason why it was chosen was this book is included for its unique mix of urban and cozy fantasy. Its humorous and lighthearted tone makes it a pleasant read that stands out from other entries in the genre. So I picked, without knowing what this book was, out of 30 something cards I think, and it ended up being Legends and Lattes, which ended up well for me because I did give it 5 stars. This is purely cozy fantasy. Again, I have it in the vlog, so if you want a really more in-depth look at it, go there. But basically we're following Viv, who is this orc character who has recently retired from like actually going out being a mercenary sort of thing, treasure hunter, one of those things, and wants to start a coffee shop. And we're basically just in that town watching her start her coffee shop. I've heard this billed a lot as having a sapphic romance, and I will say the character is sapphic. There is a hint of like, hey, we want to start a romantic relationship sort of thing, but it is not a romance. It is not a fantasy romance. It is purely cozy fantasy. There was not like a romantic build-up thing as like a main point, so just keep that in mind. But the vibes, like they told me it was gonna be cozy fantasy, it was perfectly cozy fantasy. I'm sure a lot of people know that because this was very, very, very popular when it first came out in 2022. It got picked up by a traditional publisher like less than a year after it was put out. I really, really did like this one. And then finally, we're on my favorite book of the month. This is another one I read during the Trans Rights Readathon. It was The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. Now let me tell you, I was so happy that this one got a 5 stars. This was another 12 in 12, so 12 books, 12 friends. This was suggested by Kirsty from KBeth Bookish, so thank you so, so much for that. But the reason I'm so happy about this, extra happy is I absolutely loved Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas the year that came out. I think that was my favorite book of the year that one came out. And then I had read Lost in the Neverwoods, which was technically written before Cemetery Boys, and I did not like that one very much. I think I gave it like a 3-ish, like it was just mediocre for me. Which is good because it was technically the debut writing style, even if Cemetery Boys came out first. I can see a huge difference in writing style and characters from Lost in the Neverwoods to this one. Or I guess even from like Lost in the Neverwoods to Cemetery Boys to this one. I'm really happy about it because I absolutely loved the characters and the world building, and this has magical trials in it, which I absolutely love, and the way that this was handled was so well done. This is a Latinx inspired fantasy. We do have some characters that have Spanish names, but it was very accessible in a way that, like, me, having had multiple years of high school Spanish, was able to tell some because I knew it, but also there were other ones that you can tell from context clues, but he's not like talking down to us for not knowing the language. Like, I really loved the way that was included in here. Also, I will say that I liked the way that the story went because this is a duology and like all of the magical trials are in here, and so by the end we needed something to push the story into a second book, and the way that he thought that up and wove it together was really good, because now I'm like desperately waiting for book 2 in this series that comes out in like September, so I don't have too much longer to wait, but I definitely need the next book in this series because like I loved this one so much. And that is going to be everything for March and for this video. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see more videos. I do have videos coming out Tuesdays, Thursdays, and sometimes Saturdays, so I will see you then. Bye.